Texas. That cold front's here, boy. It's clear out. It is. The wind is biting. So do this quick. So we're in First Thessalonians chapter 3. Okay, and here's if you don't know the backstory, this letter don't make a lot of sense to you. But here's what happened. Okay, Paul and Timothy helped set up this church, all right, the Theologian church, okay, which is like it's a Roman, in Roman territory, but it's right on the cusp of Greece, right on the border of Greece, okay, and Paul starts teaching about Jesus as the new king, and the king of Rome gets wind of this and comes after Paul. So Paul has to leave, but there's him and a couple other guys that had to leave, but they sent Timothy to continue to mentor them, okay? And then he starts finding out that through the persecution, they still stayed strong. They didn't fold, okay? So he's real excited about that, okay? And he's talking about things that later on get twisted, right? He's talking about his tribulation, right? And somehow that gets, the rapture comes up, right? He ain't said nothing about the rapture yet, right? But he talked about the tribulation of that period where he talked about the tribulation where, when he was getting persecuted, when the Romans were coming after him, right? And staying strong with God, having faith in God. Okay, that's, and he's praising them for staying strong in their faith through their tribulation, because they were coming after them too, right? But that's what's going on. I would say I've been a Christian since 1982, right? But different levels, right? I started going to the Catholic Church, singing in the choir. I went to Catholic Church like 10 years. That's where I met my first wife, and her mother was the choir director. I sang in the choir. Never received communion because I hadn't been confirmed or baptized. Then I got to Panama, and I went through the catechism class and got confirmed and baptized, Easter 1982, right? And then I had an encounter. I had a spiritual, connection with God. Actually, it was really powerful. All right, and I started really digging in the Bible. That's the first time I read it, cover to cover, and and then I ended up reading it again when the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my house. I'm like, what are they talking about? So I had to read the Bible again, and that's why I started seeing the connection between the prophets and revelations. And then then I had another buddy of mine who was a Mormon who baptized his own son. I thought that was the coolest thing. And I read their Bible, then I read our Bible again, and I'm like, oh, this is different. It's a whole different, tone. And then I read Hey, how's everybody doing? What are you asking me? If I could go back in time, well, I would start reading. I started reading the Bible in Acts of the Apostles. If I knew then what I know now, goodness. I wish I would have learned the Paleo Hebrew and the symbolism and the temple process and the political landscape first. And then I would have read letters from Paul. And then I would have, well, I probably would have read Acts of the Apostles first. And then letters from Paul. And then, and I would have read the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in order. But it's, it didn't happen that way. It happened the way it did. Okay. If you think about what I did, I read the same chapter of Genesis, Psalms, and Proverbs every day for a month. It took me 3.5 years to do that. Right. And then I started learning the Paleo Hebrew and the symbolism and the temple process. And I'm like, everything I read before that, I missed out on because I didn't really have the context. So anyway, that's to answer that question. Thank you for asking. In this chapter, what's going on is really, it happens all the time, that people don't know what they're talking about. And so the king of Rome is challenged because he's hearing that there's going to be a new king, Jesus coming back, and they're scared to death of Jesus, and the Jews believe they got their do's and don'ts, right, that they adhere to, and that's not getting them there. And the Christians are learning. Then there's the pagans who are bringing in all kinds of stuff that still goes on today, and that Paul's got to deal with. And then there's the pagans who, they never said that they're bringing their stuff. Then there's the people that, that started the Church of Ephesians. That that's a slave woman and a former prison guard, and they're just happy to be, be part of something, right? They didn't have the excess baggage, the other beliefs that had to be overcome that Paul had to deal with. So they were just straight up, tapping right in and believing and digging in and learning about Jesus, from Paul. So these are all the things that I'm getting out of this, right? What I'm getting from the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the main emphasis of Christ is his two laws. Love the Lord God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might, and and love your neighbor as you do yourself. Be empathetic, be compassionate. Okay, and with Paul, there's a huge responsibility emphasis, right? And that's not just responsibility to God and learning the Word, but also taking care of your family. Being a producer. He talks about it in this chapter a lot. And being productive, right? Which resonates with me highly. All right. All right. Have a good day.